I'm in pursuit of money, and I'd say I probably had two idols in my life up to that point. I had my marriage as an idol, and I had maybe protecting my marriage or in the form of income and finance, just trying to grow wealth and build for my family and the generation. Well, my marriage dissolved in 2021 as a kind of a effect of COVID. A lot of folks lost their marriage during COVID, and I was one of those statistics. And quite frankly, my heart, aside from the marriage, my heart was just not. It was broken. It was not in it. I'd spent 22 years in healthcare trying to fix the system, to see kind of how the sausage was made in both government and business. And it's like, I'm not changing the world, right? I probably had a little bit too much of pride and arrogance as a young person that I could change the world. And I really started asking the question, what is my purpose and what am I called to do?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Biblical Money. I am here with my friend, Zac Jiwa. I hope I've pronounced it correctly, from Austin, Texas. Zac is an entrepreneur, a movie maker, done some really interesting things in his life, and so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, Rami. It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Zac, give us a little bit about your entrepreneurial background before we get to like kind of the new project that you're working on, which is really exciting. But give us a little bit about your rundown of like some of the different things that you've been involved with.
Yeah, it's all an accident. First and foremost, it's all an accident. I stumbled into so for 22 years,
it's an accident for you, but I think God had a plan that she was pushing you in a different direction. So,
I mean, it's kind of miraculous that you took a dumb country bumpkin from East Texas and the things that I've been able to experience and been pulled into and called into. So you're right. Not so much an accident. So at this point, if we measure to the day, I've been 25 years in healthcare technology. I measured to 2022 whenever I discovered this magic thing that you've mentioned, the sabbatical, which I really didn't understand at the time. But, background, I got a computer science degree from a state university here in the States in Oklahoma. I was enraptured by the healthcare environment, mostly because my father-in-law was dying of cancer, and I saw a really broken system. And so, what does one do with a computer science degree and an interest in trying to fix what you see is broken? And so you end up in healthcare. I had aspired to be a physician, and don't ask me how those two things crossed, being a computer science major going into medicine. But instead, I was encouraged by a number of physicians that I worked with at the time to stick it out in technology and build there. So my career, I had a heart for entrepreneurship and startups. And in fact, I think from the earliest age of 13, I knew that I wanted to build and run a company, but turned out that the Lord needed me to go through a few hurdles before I was ready for that, as we were talking about age and readiness. So went from startup, was a very, very early, young chief information officer of a hospital. That happened at the age of 26. Was recruited by the largest company at the time, largest company in the world, Microsoft, to work in their R&D group in healthcare. And then the career took a crazy path into politics, kind of accidentally. I was recruited into a state administration, the state of Louisiana, and was the chief technology officer for the Department of Health, so all in healthcare. Then I was recruited into a larger administration and worked kind of across the White House and our Department of Health and Human Services during healthcare.gov as an innovation fellow. And then I got back into, I really missed
under
working.
Obama, or that was
Yeah, so state was Louisiana under Governor Bobby Jindal. So for those keeping record of politics, I worked for a red state, Republican state governor, and then I worked under Obama in the Obama administration under his second term, working on healthcare.gov, which was, for people who remember that period of time, healthcare.gov launched, and it wasn't pretty, and there was a lot of fixing that had to happen.
I
And
remember it was like 4 million applicants in the
fixers.
first the first 10 minutes or something, and that
I could definitely write a book. The funny part about it is as an innovation fellow, the government shut down at that point in time, and so I was considered non-essential. Um, So, I was in trying to fix things and was considered non-essential, and we went on furlough. So, but yeah, like I could write a book on politics. I could write a book on that period of time. But anyway, from there, I went back into my kind of my entrepreneurial ventures and started a company that led to, leading a bigger company. And then we ended up in COVID, and I leveraged all of my connections to try to help, you know, solve problems, I guess is the simplest way. And my last venture from 2020 to 22 was as an executive in a healthcare AI company. So it's all been I could have never predicted that path or painted that picture, and I don't really don't know how I got there, but that was the bulk of my career.
Wow. I mean, healthcare is so like it's so important. I mean, we're there's actually a rabbinic teaching which says the best of doctors go to hell, right? Meaning that why? Yeah, it's pretty bad, right? Because to an extent they think that they're replacing God, and they end up, they think that it's in their hand as opposed to really where the healing ultimately comes from. Yes, they might be a facilitator of that. So that's
I have met a few doctors who have Messiah complex, so I get it.
definitely have that. I'm so curious, just in terms of like working in government. Did you feel any of this as far as like a religious obligation? Like here you are helping the most number of people that you can possibly kind of be in touch, or maybe in Microsoft you were actually helping the biggest number of people. Is that something that you kind of thought about or reflected on?
It's a really great question. I would have never used the term a religious calling, but I think there's something built into all of us that is a call to service. I mean, I think we're innately built to serve. And I mean, from my youngest age, I will intersect religion for this for a second, though. At my youngest age, I felt called to serve, and that earliest calling was probably militarily. But I grew up in a pretty legalistic religious environment, as I would use the term religious, that kind of pushed me down the path of a conscientious objector. And so I had this uprising in my spirit to serve, and yet I was kind of capped not to serve the way that I think we as Americans think of being called to serve. And so I had several times in my career where there were pauses or opportunities. I'm like, maybe I should go join the Air Force or the Army, and maybe I can my technical skills and what I know about healthcare maybe help the VA. I had those feelings, but it was very strong. It was very strong when I was called to serve in the state of Louisiana. And look, if you know anything about working for the government, that they are not the highest paycheck that you can take. And in fact, I hate to go back and think about it, but Microsoft I joined in 2008 when stock prices were the lowest probably they have ever been, at somewhere 25, $26 a share. And joining in the role that I joined in, I had a nice little package that after 2 years being called to the government, I had to walk away from. So not only in stock, but salary, I cut my salary in more than half to go serve. And so I wouldn't say that it was religiously connected, but it was definitely a calling in my spirit to go serve.
Right. Yeah. I do think that that's one of the things, and one of the impetuses that I have for this podcast and to get this out there is because I do think there's a religious imperative in the work that we're doing. And all too often we enter the workforce, we go through college, and we're we know right and wrong. Meaning I'm not talking about kind of those big areas of like, oh, should I go ahead and steal from my employer, steal from this person, that they, I'm not talking about that's petty.
We mostly get the Ten Commandments right? We mostly get
Yeah,
those.
no, I'm saying, but those are like kind of like silly things. But the question is, do we go into our work and do we look at it as like a religious obligation? I'm serving somebody else. Why is somebody giving me money? They're giving me money because I'm going ahead and I'm serving. I'm giving you something,
Yeah.
and I'm helping another person. And I think all too often It's the entrepreneurs that are given the bad rap. It's the CEOs, right? We talked about this earlier, but when you have a CEO on, when you have a murder mystery on TV, it's always going to be the CEO because he's got some vendetta and he's got to make himself more money. But no, we have the opportunity to help and to provide for people. So that's where I think one of the ethos I think is missing from that work ethic, that it should come from a religious obligation. I'm curious kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I grew up under bad theology and really under a kind of a poverty doctrine, and right, we would cherry pick passages and miss some of it. The love of money is the root of all evil. In fact, I watched my grandfather, my uncle, who are both pastors, really kind of struggle through life with that mentality. I don't think my grandfather ever made more than 15 or $20,000 a year, and he was just taking what the 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 Lord gave him, but he was never, there was never an aspiration to be rich or to have a lot of money. And but I agree with you, right? It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. It's the idolatry of money. It's the failure to recognize that it all comes from God, that it all comes from Yahweh, that it's all His to begin. Like He created. If you're a believer, whether you're Jewish or Christian, you believe that He created it all, He owns it all, and He will, deliver it to where it needs to be. So if we go into the parable of the talents, it's like, what are you doing with that? So I'm not afraid of earning money. I don't think I thought about it in a religious context in my life and career until about 5 or 6 years ago, when I joined one of the companies that I joined in 2018 was a Christian-led company, and had an incredible impact on my life. It was a Christian-led company. It was first and foremost all about ministering to other people, and in fact, we had a requirement to tithe at the corporate level, and we were encouraged to tithe at the individual level, and we donated into a DAF, and then we chose particular ministries or projects, whether that be an orphanage in Africa or whether it be to spur businesses in a third world country. And it was really the first time for me that it all clicked. Number one, these two, if I will, these two Zacs, this secular working business Zac and this spiritual believing Zac, kind of created the possibility that those two people that I struggled with on Sunday morning versus, Tuesday night were one in this, unified self. And, and that created a purpose that was bigger than me, that doesn't require, military service or doesn't require government service. It says, what are you doing to create impact in lives and businesses and wherever else that you can, and your family, obviously, that you can touch.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. There was a certain Torah scholar, Bible scholar, he was leaving the seminary and he was going out to the business world, and he wrote his rabbi a letter, and he said, I don't know what to do. I want to, I feel like I'm leading a double life. I have my business life, and I have my synagogue life. I have my religious life. And he said, don't look at it as two, when you look at your house, he says, you have two rooms, right? You don't look at it as two, it's one house, and it should be a broad life. And that's the idea, is to bring, God should be filling every aspect of our life. And I think that's something that, a lot of times it's difficult, because right now I'm dealing with a deadline, and I'm trying to close, and the month is coming to the end. And if we don't close that deal, then okay, we don't eat, or whatever it is. But I think to recognize that, where is that coming from? And so I think that is certainly one of the challenges.
Yeah, and if you've lived long enough, you recognize the seasons of your life as well, and you recognize seasons of great prosperity And then sometimes, and certainly in my life, you go through droughts of nothing. I think the Lord is teaching you in that very aspect of those seasons that it's all his and that it's all from him and he gives and takes away. But I don't think it's meant to be I don't think it's meant to be an affliction. I think it's meant to be like, can you be grateful? Can you be joyful? Like James 1 in the New Testament talks about count it all joy, my brothers, when trials come your way. And that could be cancer, but that could also be like financial, nothingness. Can you be joyful? Can you be joyful, and can you recognize that the creator of the universe is the one that creates all of these things? And that's, that scripture in particular has been beneficial in my life, as well in those type of seasons is Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus talks about, you know, the birds of the air and the flowers of the field, right? Do they sow? Do they work? Do they toil? And yet how much greater are you than them, right? And just talking about your worth. And so those are just, a couple of scriptures that I tend to weave in because I think about them a lot in terms of, and which we'll get to, right, whenever I get to the end of kind of healthcare journey and into sabbatical, that the Lord is showing me these things really clearly. Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself.
Yeah, and it's so much kind of, we have this mentality and this this Shark Tank mentality that we now have, that it's like, okay, by the age of 26, I got to have my startup. I have to have everything figured out. I have to have enough money that I can retire on, as opposed to saying, no, the blessing will be there when it needs to be there, and the hardships come, and they're also a blessing. One thing I know we have within Judaism is we are expected to say a blessing on good fortune, right? A person inherits money, you say a blessing, and then there's a blessing when someone passes away, which is the blessing of Baruch Dayan Emet, that God is the judge, is the faithful judge. Okay, so meaning when something bad happens, also recognize this is also a blessing. You might not see it as a blessing, and that's what you were talking about, seeing that joy. So you took this sabbatical, what, about 5 years ago?
Yes, I took sabbatical starting April of 2022. There's some, yeah, 3 years ago. There's some business that I was in that was winding down, not by my own desire, but it was just the course of nature. But also, I felt a pretty big uprising in my spirit, um, that that I needed that I needed to rest. In fact, I had a great mentor coach at the time who used the term sabbatical, and it was really the first time outside of academia or pastoral reference that I'd actually heard the word sabbatical used. I obviously, understand about the root of sabbatical to Sabbath, whatever that root word is. On the seventh day Jesus rested, so I knew the context of rest. I knew enough about the Jewish law that that you were to let your fields lie fallow after the 7 years. And I looked at my life at 2022, 3 years ago. I was 44. And I thought, man, that's a foreign concept, and I've never taken a rest, let alone a year. Like I'm just I'm in pursuit of, money, and I'd say, I probably had two idols in my life up to that point. I had my marriage as an idol, and I had maybe protecting my marriage, or in the form of income and finance, just trying to grow wealth and build for my family and the generation. Well, my marriage dissolved in 2021 as a kind of a effect of COVID. A lot of folks lost their marriage in during COVID, and I was one of those statistics. And quite frankly, my heart, aside from the marriage, my heart was just not, it was broken. It was not in it. I'd spent 22 years healthcare, trying to fix the system to see kind of how the sausage was made in both government and business. And, it's like, I'm not changing the world, right? I probably had a little bit too much of pride and arrogance as a young person that I could change the world. And I really started asking the question, what is my purpose and what am I called to do? So this two person Zach that had kind of come together and collided to become this one person Zach, and maybe we'd say three person Zach if you're a fan of the Trinity, body, soul, and spirit. And what is this Trinity Zach, this three person Zach? What is he actually called to do, and what is he supposed to be doing? But in order to figure that out, I was clearly being called to sabbatical. It's probably the most uncomfortable thing that I've ever done. And I had questions like, would this period of rest make me irrelevant in the market? Would I lose everything? Would I discover, maybe the scariest is, would I discover something about myself, or would I discover a purpose that I'm called to that that I don't want to do, or that I can't do, or any of those sort of things. And so, yeah, starting April 1st, 2022, I'd already had a fun trip booked with one of my friends to go hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu in Peru. So I was like, okay, that's a that's a way to kick off the sabbatical. And so I spent my sabbatical journey doing two things. Well, three things technically. One, going and doing experiences that I'd always wanted to do, like this freedom to rest. Some would not call what I did rest, but it was very restful for me. I spent a lot of time hiking and traveling around the world. I hiked the Camino de Santiago across Spain, the 500 miles across Spain. I hiked up the 26 miles of Gold Coast of Costa Rica. I hiked across Vietnam and Thailand and Indonesia, and I took my kids on this. I have four children, Rami, and I have a 21 foot camper. And I don't know if you've ever tried to do this, but um, barely fit us. But if you try to pile four kids in your vehicle and take them around the country for 31 days in a 21 foot camper, that's an adventure. It was not one that they were willing to do, but it was one that they will never forget in all their life. But took them around the mountain
We
states
did it across the
and
Canadian Rockies with my parents when we were a little older, but it was 5 days, so it was a bit more manageable
yeah.
than a month. But
Oh, trust me, this was ill-advised, I guess, is what I would say. Ill-advised, but it was absolutely a magical journey to experience with them. At the time, single father with four kids. I was about halfway through. I was like, and I was toting this camper through the hills and wind and everything behind my car. I'm like, I'm just surprised that we made it, but it was a great blessing. And then just to kind of speed that along, I spent the intention was I'm going to go enjoy, and then I'm going to go serve. So half of my sabbatical, I intentionally went and took that camper and lived out at one of our homeless communities. It's actually a community in East Austin, where this incredible group of folks led by Alan Graham. It's called Community First Village, where he's building tiny homes to rehome the homeless.
I actually saw
And
I saw that on, I don't know if it was YouTube or some. I saw that specific development floating around.
it's an incredible. I mean, I'm not advertising for them or marketing for them, but it is world class um, model for bringing the homeless off the streets and putting them in a community, because that's what they need. That's why they're homeless in the first place. Someone who's been chronically homeless for 10 years is someone that lacks community, lacks family. And anyway, he's built an incredible place out there, and that organization, Mobile Loaves and Fishes. And so I went and just parked my camper out there. I called Alan. I said, can I just park the camper out there and serve? And he's like, yeah, I don't know what you're going to do. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do either. But the opportunity to spend time with people, and kind of minister to them, pray for them, feed them, whatever it needed. I mean, I did IT work, right, for them, gates working and wireless networking and teaching people how to use phones. I did all of that. And it's not a pat on the back. It was just like, I need to be doing something that's selfless, and I need to be in community. And so that's how I spent my full year sabbatical. And the third piece that I did was I spent a lot of time um, asking the Lord for my purpose. I spent 22 years. I felt a lot like Solomon in Ecclesiastes. Like I think he opens up Ecclesiastes like it's all crap, it's all worthless. Everything is meaningless, and that's kind of where I was in my life whenever I started the sabbatical. And so I spent a lot of time either walking, talking to the Lord, just asking him for purpose and where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do. And I didn't have this heart for healthcare as much anymore. And but it was absolutely beautiful. I could do 3 podcasts on the experiences that I had on my sabbatical and how it changed my life.
I mean, it's amazing because so much of it is we just don't stop. We're in this rat race, and it's just on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And it's funny, when I took my sabbatical, I felt very similar to you. It's like, well, I'm going to be irrelevant, like in the market. Well, what am I going to do? I come off of building a business for 10 years, and it's like where I was integral and every day, and then it's like, okay, now what? And it's like you're kind of free falling, and it's like, okay, I need to give myself some structure because otherwise I'd go crazy. So, but and it's funny looking back. I'm like, shoot, I should have done things a little bit differently. But it sounds like you really used your time productively, which is amazing.
Oh, there were so many things that I didn't do, and I think the conscious part of it is like, if this is what the Lord meant for us to do, um, you know, uh, like mentally structuring my life for the rest of it. Like, how do I do that every 7 years? I don't think you need to be legalistic about it, but rest is really important, especially for uh, fast-paced Western culture, especially for entrepreneurial mindset. There needs to be periods of rest. You dream, you dream in rest. You vision in rest. It's not often that you get to do those sort of things whenever you're, you know, 7 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. at night, just leading a team, building a product, whatever it is that you're doing. So.
Yeah, no, we definitely have become slaves to our, you talk about the idol of work. So you're on to a new project. Let's jump into that, which is it's a passion project and a little bit more fun. Hopefully, I think the end product will be fun. I don't know if it'll be fun every single day getting there, but yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah. I don't stop thinking entrepreneurially, right? So I'm always thinking about how it can create a value. But so the project at hand that we're talking about is a show called Food, Wine, and God. I describe it as Anthony Bourdain meets C.S. Lewis. It absolutely draws from a passion that I've had for all of my life. Growing up in the kitchen, this is the interesting part that I shared with you, right? My father was a immigrant, Pakistani from East Africa, Muslim by faith. My mother was a white preacher's kid from middle of Oklahoma. I'm the product of those two, but what that meant, pastor's kid as she was. What that meant was I spent a lot of time experiencing pretty rich flavors early on in life, and so that gave me a passion for food. In my adult life, I've invested in a few restaurants because and I love to cook. I love to cook, and even on my sabbatical, every chance that I got that I could afford, I would, do Michelin star restaurants, and I would go into, the wine country of Spain and Peru and try different wines and all of that sort of stuff. And took cooking classes in Bali and Vietnam. Like, just that, half the adventure for me was a food adventure. But I also had on my 40th birthday, so we just kind of have to rewind a little bit, and this, parlays into, where you are and what you're doing. My 40th birthday present to myself, long before my sabbatical, was to visit the Holy Land and do the Jesus tour of Israel, and that was profound to me. But when you go on a church Jesus tour, this was the thing that I felt was missing, was I didn't get to do what I did on my sabbatical, which is I didn't get to go into Macneuda and eucalyptus and go into the Golan Heights winery. I didn't get to do all those things. One, because I was with a kind of an evangelical church group, but two, because you're with 50 people, and you can't really do that. So I'd sneak off every once in a while and go to the shuk and, see the market. So that had a big influence as well. In fact, I registered the domain Food, Wine, and God in 2017 when I came back from Israel, thinking that all the things that I missed, I wanted to take people on and go on this exploration. So that's the genesis of this brand, Food, Wine, and God. And then whenever I got off my sabbatical, I honestly, for those people who are not charismatic, they may not jive with this, but I really felt the Lord speak to me and said, from your passions and your heart, this is what you were made to do. And so you have to pursue that. And so I've really been pursuing this vision for a show that allows us to tell the story of our faith through the lens of a cultural travel and food experience. And that's why I call it Anthony Bourdain meets C.S. Lewis. Of course, C.S. Lewis was great author of Christian, of Christianity. But like when you do that, Rami, if you think about following me on 7 seasons of Food, Wine, and God, and we start in the Garden of Eden, and in modern times, Basra, Iraq, is where we believe it to be, and just journey through biblical history, through the Torah, through the Abrahamic period, through the Mosaic period, kings and prophets, the escape from Egypt into the Promised Land, and then we get to go into Jesus's time. For us Christians, we get to spend, we get to see Jewish Israel and we get to see Christian Israel. And then if we continue to follow that path through Acts and Paul's journeys, then we get to go do some fun, maybe dangerous right now. But I'm not worried about danger. Danger is my middle name. We'll go into Syria and Lebanon and Turkey, Greece, Macedonia. We get into the Roman age, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and we get to Italy, and so the Roman Catholic period really, and then season 7 is really the Protestant period, right, where Martin Luther nailed the 99 Thesis, and we get into Germany, we go to Spain. I love those places. I've explored a lot of them, but being able to tell a story that is, somewhat secular in nature. Like everybody loves, well, not everybody, but I think a big chunk, let's say 90% of the world, would be attracted to food, wine, and God. Those 3 themes, they're my favorite 3 things.
Well, even
And
if you're
get to
not
take
into
people on an
all of them
adventure.
together, you're going to be into one of them, right? It's
Right, right,
unless
probably.
you're like really, you're one of the yoga people, yoga atheist, like
Yeah,
right, far out in
yeah.
California or something, right? So
There's a Venn diagram where there's a small slice that's probably not into it, but that's okay. You can't be everything to all people, but it's an adventure. It's an opportunity to be a little bit of a ministry. I mean, for me and my faith in particular, I spent most of my life, I'd say, 40 years, not really even understanding. Um, uh, Not really understanding the last 2,000 years of my faith, right? We were talking earlier about, the size, the number of churches in Dallas, or, a large metroplex, if you will. And yet when you go to Dallas, Rami, you're going to see the Lutheran church and the Baptist church and the Church of Christ and the Nazarene church. And what does all that mean? And where did all those come from? And, I referenced that I grew up in a pretty legalistic church environment in the evangelical church. There's like 5,000 different sects. Where did that all come from? I didn't discover that until I started my master's of divinity and started reading like biblical history. When we read the Bible, we read from 5,000 years ago to 2,000 years ago. Nobody really studies what happened in the last 2,000 years, and it's all colored based on histories around war and politics. It's not. It's we don't really study faith history for the last 2,000 years unless you're going into ministry.
yeah, no, it's definitely it is something interesting. I do think within Judaism we probably spend a little bit more time, as we were talking earlier, about the kind of rabbinic, so we are always trying to kind of see what was going on at different points in history, and So we definitely touch a little bit more on those points. But yeah, it is something which I have actually noticed in my work with Christians is kind of this gap between kind of like it's like okay, Jesus, there's Jesus and then there's me, and it's like, well, how did some Middle Eastern guy get to Dallas? Like what was that transition? What did that look like? So
Well, I also think it's really important. I referenced that I'm the product of a Muslim father and a Christian mother. I want to lead this project with curiosity and with this ability to connect. I mean, the one thing in the show, from the vision of the show, is like the last scene is really around the table. Like we've gone into a region, we've said what's the relevance and historical. Why Zach are you going to Basra, Iraq? You're sitting, you're walking into the local market. You're looking at what's grown there. You're talking to a chef or maybe a historian from that era. You go back in the kitchen. I go back in the kitchen and I cook that famous dish from Basra, Iraq. I don't know what it is, at that famous restaurant. And then each end episode is like around a table and sharing of that meal. That's where we get the most connection in our lives, right? Whether it be with, a business person, like, what do you do with business? What do you do in business? How do you close a deal? You typically go to dinner and have a nice steak and have some wine. And it's just like, that's how we do every other part of our business. And how do we get to know people and how do we get to understand? I mean, I'm almost guaranteed, right, in Basra, Iraq, I'm going to be sitting down with a Muslim chef who's cooked his famous dish just because of where we are in the region. I'm not afraid of that at all. I want to be curious about that, and maybe it'll draw curiosity to whatever faith you are in. Maybe it'll draw some curiosity of what's this Christian doing, eating at a Muslim restaurant with a Muslim chef in Basra, Iraq. Like, let's have that conversation. Let's do the hard things. Me and you will end up in Jerusalem, and we'll be eating at probably eucalyptus would
as
be my
long as long
guess,
as you're
and
paying for it, because good. No.
well, I mean, that's why we have to raise some money,
Right.
right? I mean, clearly,
otherwise we're going for
clearly
falafel.
this.
Well, it's like
Well, we can go. Man, I had the greatest, the craziest thing. Is you pronounce it the shuk,
yeah, the shark. You
the
got it.
the Matnayuna
Yeah,
market, the shuk. Yeah, like it turns into a. This was what I found so fascinating about Jerusalem while I was there. Like you go past like 10 p.m. and it turns into a dance club kind of thing, and right there on the corner, I don't know if it's still there or not, but they make like Belgium waffles with all this stuff on it, like fruit and stuff. I'm like, that's one of the best things that I ate. So we might have to do like a two-prong show because I've got to eat those waffles again in the shuk.
yeah.
We'll do street foods of Israel. Can we do that?
Yeah. Well, that'll be a special episode that we do. So
You buy the waffles and I'll buy eucalyptus. How about
okay,
that?
so that sounds good. Wonderful. So this is and this is something just so we're if anyone is out there, you're looking to raise money for this and to get this project underway, and is that's where we're up to. So if anyone is
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we spent about a year in development of the show. We probably overworked it. There was, I didn't tell you the part that I'm not a filmmaker and that I had not the faintest idea whenever I felt called to do a show that I needed to actually figure out how that's done. So, I've got some great production staff and crew, marketing teams, and all of that stuff in place. So I've kind of orchestrated it all. I've built out 7 seasons with 7 episodes each. So we've got 49 episodes that we can go do. And now we're hitting that fundraising model. I think fundraising for film over the last 3 years has been really tough. It's not gotten that much better, but certainly Hollywood is starting to open back up. The faith genre of film, and try to be I try to be careful about this because I want this to be a show for everyone. But certainly there are markets that are maybe more ripe than others. But the Christian media in particular seems to be blowing up with what Angel Studios has been doing with The Chosen. You've probably seen The House of David on Amazon. which the Wonder Project has been working on. So there's certainly some more finances flowing through that, and so yeah, we're hoping. I mean, my honest hope is that we would find a either a ministry or high net worth individual or family office that really believes in the mission and the vision and wants to go on a journey. Will kind of get us kick started, and then we can work off of that, maybe in the same way that the Chosen or the Bible Project has done over time, and just leverage the fan base to continue to build and grow.
Amazing. I will we'll end here, and I want to end with a blessing that God should provide you with the funds to get this project. It sounds amazing, and I'm sure it will be much success to you and really to the world. I mean, that's ultimately our mission, is to bring knowledge of God to the world, and usually the best way to get to someone's to get to their head and to their heart is through their stomach. So that's certainly
Absolutely.
a way to do that. So thank you, and
Rami, thank you for the blessing. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
thank you. All the best. God bless.